Okay, go.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Real Tech for Real People, episode 138. This is Tony Pittman with Steve Brady.
Hey, Tony, it's nice to be with the star of the show.
You snuck that in there.
Yeah, it's been a hectic day for me. I'm sure it was for you too. I traveled quite a bit today just to be here with you. I feel like Mr. Rogers all of a sudden.
Just to get back home, huh?
Just to get back home, traveled a long way to be home with you and of course the wife and our viewers. I'm going to lead off. First, I'll mention that we are part of the Tech Podcast Network. We're still proud to be part of them. Check out techpodcast.net, I think it is. I don't have my little helper here with me right now. And I also wanted to tell y'all that we had this discussion about 3D printing last week. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, I will have a 3D printing expert from a company that does a lot of printing with 3D printers for industrial purposes as well as private purposes on the show with us. And he's looking forward to it. He's been listening to what we do, and he's excited to be part of our show. So it's something to look forward to in the next few weeks.
Good stuff.
Hey, let's jump right into the news. You threw something right up front, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say about HTC.
Wow is all I can say.
Well, that kind of was quick.
Wow. This probably in the last 5 or so years, since the iPhone kind of changed the game on smartphones, I have not seen a more impressive piece of hardware. I mean, I think the bar just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Now, as soon as I say wow about this HTC One phone, I know that Samsung, I almost said Google, Samsung is about to roll out the Galaxy S4 anytime now. But for right now, at least this week, the HTC One, which got announced by HTC in a simultaneous release in London and New York on Tuesday. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it.
I have not. So what's going on with this phone? Because I know the rumors about the S4 we can talk about soon, but I mean, I'm assuming WOW is the new processor.
Well, probably the best way I've heard it described. I was a fan of the HTC One X for a while.
Right.
I always thought that was
That's what I thought you were talking about.
My favorite, Android phone. And I read one blog. I think it was by the guys at Pocket Now. They said this is like if the iPhone 5 and the HTC One X got together and had a child. This is what the HTC One is. It kind of looks like it's got a 4.7-inch screen, so it's got the bigger screen. A lot of people like these days. It's got
me included.
Yeah, okay. It's got that same kind of design language as the iPhone 5 with the what do they call it, the diamond cut, chamfered edge and all that stuff.
Okay.
The camera bulge on the back, which was not the greatest feature of the HTC One X, is gone, so it's more rounded. But probably the biggest thing is new version of the HT Sense kind of skin that they put on Android. Looks really good. Kind of a take on the Windows Phone with kind of the live tiles. They call it something else though. Blip feed or something like that. Blink feed.
Okay.
And it's everyone's going with this live kind of interface you can use. It's got great speakers on top and bottom. That's how they get the stereo. It's still based on Beats audio, but they call that boom sound. Boom sound.
Interesting.
And they have attempted to change the game on cameras. You can probably appreciate this more than most. So we've all been talking about megapixels for years and years. This thing called a megapixel. They've changed the game, and now they have a camera that uses what they call ultra pixels. Ultra pixels, and they're using like 2 different sensors. I think they're 4 megapixel sensors, but there's multiple levels. Whatever, you have to go read the tech specs on it. But they've basically tried to change the game on camera technology and kind of reset it using this unit called an ultra pixel. And I haven't seen any pictures from it yet, but from the touting they're throwing out there, they really believe they've got the best camera ever put in a phone. HTC's cameras have been good lately, so I believe they probably have raised the bar there. I was just really impressed with what it looked like and the reviews I've seen on it, and the new HTC Sense. I'm looking forward to seeing what this phone is really like, but I think moreover, it's just amazing how all these companies keep leapfrogging each other, raising the bar. No longer does Apple come out with a phone that for 2-3 years is heads above the crowd. In 6 months, 9 months, these other guys are coming and really continuing to accelerate the race. So I think that's good for consumers overall. But we'll see what Samsung does. But for right now, in my book, the HTC One is the best piece of hardware out there, I have to say. Whatever that is worked.
So you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
It sounds like it's your built-in mic or something.
Oh, unfortunately it is. This is backup audio, backup of a backup of a backup, and I'm on my notebook now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll just have to, be an up-close and personal show for the rest of the show. So we were talking about the HTC. I think we're still recording.
Yeah, we were talking about the HTC One, and I was commenting on just how aggressive the big players are, and I'd say that's Apple, that's BlackBerry now again, that's Samsung, that's HTC, Microsoft to a degree with Nokia. I mean, I think they're really trying to one-up each other, which is good because this hardware is just getting really, really good.
Well, and HTC, they need something because they're losing money right now.
Yeah, they need something, and you can tell they went all out on it. We'll see how it does. I think the thing is, will there be enough breathing space between it and the new Galaxy phone that's due out? Can they make up any ground there?
Yeah, this will be interesting for me. I'm coming up on my renewal for my contract. I got my Best Buy points. I've got all that stuff, and so I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And I was thinking S4 or Note 2, but I'm going to have to give this one a serious look.
It's definitely worth a look. Now, we don't know what the Galaxy phone will look like. That could make it moot. But for now, it's a very good phone.
And one of the things that I noticed is as it's coming out, it's already available on AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint.
Yes.
And not Verizon yet, but they've got it on across almost all the networks. So and with it being on Sprint, it would do CDMA, so it should be able to go over on the Verizon network. If you just get the phone, you should be able to get it unlocked and move it over. So that'll be interesting.
Yep.
Well, sorry for the delay there for all those folks that were watching that. We'll delete that out here, hopefully in the editing process. I do want a couple other stories. For those of you that are in a small business, working a small business, something like that, you can now take advantage of free cloud computing. In other words, your computing is being done in the cloud on somebody else's servers from a company called Profit Bricks. You really have to be a startup company, a low energy or low price startup company that's just beginning to do business. But that's interesting news. And just look for Profit Bricks and search for free cloud computing. Just an interesting tidbit of news there.
Free cloud computing. There you go.
The other thing I just thought I'd bring up really quickly is Google is trading over $800 a share now. Interesting thing. They don't have as many shares as Apple, so while the cost per share is almost double where Apple has been lately, Apple is still the highest market cap company out there.
Yeah, so you always have to be aware of that. Yeah, it depends on how many shares are outstanding, etc. But it still says something good about Google. I mean, people are feeling positive about it when you see the stock price going up, no matter what the market cap is.
Well, good.
And you just wonder what this means. Are we seeing a change in fortune? Apple may have peaked. Here comes Google. They've got this dominant mobile OS. They've now got Chrome on these laptops. They're really trying to push hard. We've seen the Chromebook. They just released this new Chromebook Pixel, which is a much higher end flavor of that Chromebook platform. Google is just hitting it hard in every part of the tech market right now.
Well, and they're coming out with Google stores, and everybody's saying this is going to be critical for Google to get, for instance, Google Glasses in the hands or face of potential customers. If you're going to pay $500 to $750 for a glass experience, you're going to want to be able to give it a test drive, if only in the store. So that'll be interesting as well. And Matthew, spread HDGFX, or Darnell, depending on who you are, he commented to me yesterday that Google Glasses is now making it into his Twitter feed and his Facebook stream, and that more and more people are talking about that. I reminded him, isn't it cool that you hang out with Tony and me? Because you've known about this for over a year.
You've known about it, yeah. Well, it is interesting. I think Google is hot right now, and the interesting thing is, like Microsoft 10 or 15 years ago, it's not just them. They've got this whole ecosystem of partners coming with them. We were just talking about a couple of them: Samsung, HTC. So they're going to be the big show, I believe, of the next few years.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and certainly worth keeping an eye on. And it makes me kind of happy that I'm sitting here with my Android phone, but because I like the operating system and I support what they're doing with it. And that's the thing, is as much as I'm a fanboy for Android, it's really because of the fact it's doing what I want it to do these days, and giving me the flexibility. And if somebody else comes up, Windows 8 phone, I've looked at that, but Google seems to be, like you say, hitting on all cylinders. A very good automotive reference there, Tony. Well, the other thing that happened the day after we did our show, actually the day we did our show, I guess, last week, we didn't talk much about it, but there was that meteor that exploded pretty much over Russia. Seems to be the place where that happens. We had the Tunguska, or whatever they call it, where the meteor that took out a whole forest in Siberia at the turn of the last century, just leveled the whole thing. This one, they say, injured thousands of people now?
Yeah, broke a lot of windows, injured a lot of people. Amazing. I don't know if you saw some of the dash cam videos of that thing, but they say equivalent to the force of multiple nuclear bombs going off. Amazing.
Yeah, and that's a small one. They said it was maybe 100 feet. Maybe probably a lot smaller than that, and that's that powerful. And that was the same day, several hours earlier, than the one that was passing 17,000 miles away from Earth, which is 2/3 of the way to a geostationary orbit satellite. So you have the satellites up here, and here's this meteor passing through, which would have been much, much larger.
Yeah, scary stuff.
So we live in interesting and uncontrollable times.
That is for sure.
Well, you mentioned the dash cams. Did you hear the stories or read the stories about Russia and dashboard cams?
No, but what is the story there? For some reason, when these events happen, so many people seem to have these dash cams. I wonder what's going on with those.
Well, actually, somebody asked the question, and I read the story. It was really kind of bizarre. They say you'll find more dashboard cams than cell phones. Every car will have a dashboard cam, but not every driver will have a cell phone. And it comes down to the fact that the police are so corrupt and traffic is so bad in Russia that they have these cams on the dash to protect themselves.
To protect themselves? That's sad.
Themselves, yeah. And so you'll see more and more accidents. And they say it's interesting that the reality is Russians apparently are very bad drivers, too. Their rate of accidents in Russia are 3 to 4 times the accident rate here in the United States. And that's per capita, not per car. And the intriguing thing is we have 3 to 4 to 5 times as many cars in the United States than they do in Russia. So they far outstrip us in accidents per car.
That's interesting.
It's a very bizarre number.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of little things. But, the reason I brought up the Meteor is there is actually a website you can go to that has mapped out all the meteor strikes, so meteorites, a meteorite being a meteor that impacts the Earth, right? So a meteor is in the sky, a meteorite when it hits the ground.
Okay, so these are actual impacts.
These are actual impacts, and the graphic on the CNET news story, which we'll put in the show notes, that particular graphic, if you notice, it's just the United States.
Doesn't look good for me.
No, I was going to say Texas.
Looks good for you.
I'm going to see where I am.
Relatively speaking.
You're kind of a red hotspot there.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting map. It's, I believe it's a global map. And this really, it goes back, what did I say? It goes back to 2300
BC.
4,300 years of meteor strikes, which is a blink of the eye in ecological and geologic time. But there's a lot of strikes here, and the size of the strikes are represented on the map and those sorts of things. So if you're interested in that, go look for the map. Look for Javier, Javier, Javier de la Torre,
Yeah.
founder of Visuality, created this particular map. And,
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it's one of those bizarre little things that when you look at it, like you say, it's kind of scary when you live in places that are large and bright red.
I guess I'll hope that means, look, we've already done our penance, and the rest are going to get the rest.
Oh, we can hope.
Years.
We can hope. Now maybe we know what happened to the Aztecs.
Exactly. Yeah, they got hammered.
Mayans or one of those cultures. We thought it was the fact that they practiced ecological suicide. No, they got hammered with a meteor just like the dinosaurs. The other big story the past week or so has been Chinese hackers. And
they don't do that, really? Do they?
Did we talk about this last time?
No.
Well, this is really kind of what I want to do for Tony's thoughts today. There's a video that you can watch that talks about the Chinese hackers, and certain organizations have been following them for about 11 years, just seeing what they're doing. They've hacked Apple, they hacked Facebook, and the way they got into both of those companies is actually by hacking into a developer site. So when people would go to develop for Apple or for Facebook, they would be able to get in there. There's a company I was hearing about today where they said that every few days they would lock down the company. I believe it was a manufacturing firm, because they would just shut down the whole system because of the fact they knew they were being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently they would come under attack. And there was one day when they stopped being attacked, and the CEO came out and said, they've got all we've got. They've stolen all of our IP, our intellectual property. So, not based on where you are with HP, but just your knowledge of the industry, Tony. Tony's thought for today is, how at risk do you think, not our government, but our industrial base is to industrial espionage and IP theft based on what we've been seeing the past few weeks?
Well, I think it's a huge risk. I mean, you look at all the all the companies that have outsourced manufacturing to China. Look at the vulnerabilities that exist just in that. I mean, they're making all these devices, all these components. If they wanted to, they could implant who knows what right into those, and really, almost send a bunch of literal Trojan horses right into all the countries of the world where those components and devices are going. I think it's a huge risk. I think when people used to think about World War III, like when the Terminator movie came out and the guy came from the future, and World War III was a bunch of flying ships and machine guns and bombs going off. No, I think World War III is going to be more like War Games, right? That movie about computers fighting each other, cyber attacks back and forth between the superpowers. I mean, I think that's the next front where countries can do huge damage to each other. But I'm sure, here in the U.S., I'm sure we've got our share of hackers who can do some damage to other countries as well. I'm sure in our press we're only hearing what China has done or may be doing to us, but I'm quite sure it's a battle that's going back and forth amongst nations today, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the notion that they're hacking for our intellectual property when they're making all of our stuff to begin with. Why did they hack Apple? Apple sends over everything and has them make it.
Well, yeah. Well, they know what they're making now, right? They don't know what Apple may be making next, right? Maybe they wanna get it,
Interesting. And I don't use thumb drives anymore, and DoD stopped letting you use thumb drives several years ago. The Department of Defense did, but yeah, I've seen more and more stories and heard more and more stories of thumb drives coming from China. They hand them out at these conferences, and they do have a worm or a virus or something in the boot record of that thumb drive that comes on the thumb drive from China already pre-installed to attack your machine. So I've gotten to the point now where we talked about cloud computing a few minutes ago. I use Dropbox or I use SpiderOak. I want to use any of those other ways of moving files between computers and getting to it through the cloud, hoping that I'm on some sort of secure connection that will protect me from the physical. You know, we talk about don't insert a strange dongle in your port. We're back to that conversation again.
Oh, absolutely. And I wonder if we're going to see a time when governments are going to start insisting on, hey, we don't want any equipment sold to us by you, Mr. and Ms. PC manufacturer, that wasn't made in the U.S. You know, you hear the stories about Apple now making computers in the U.S. again. Oddly enough, Lenovo, right, Chinese manufacturer, ramping up manufacturing in the U.S. I could see a time when, due to these risks, you might see, you know, any government contracts in the U.S. might require domestic-made hardware, because this is a real risk. You know, that when those devices are made there in the hands of governments that may want to do us harm, it almost seems kind of silly that we would willingly take that and bring it into our most secured environments and actually do work on them. I mean, it is a risk, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really interesting idea that maybe what we'll do is, you know, we're going to see our government protecting industry, not protecting it because it makes sense for the economy, but protecting it because it just makes security sense.
Security sense. I mean, they already have rules. You know, we do a lot of business with the government where for certain deals, only U.S. citizens can touch even the paperwork, right? So it's kind of silly that you only allow U.S. citizens to touch that paperwork, but you'd allow foreign, you know, made hardware into your most sensitive installations when you don't know what could have embedded in that. I think it's something we're going to have to really think about.
So I know in some of the discussions we've been having in the work I'm doing, we're talking through some of these sorts of things, and information assurance is a big deal. I actually now have a government CAC card again, you know, one of those cards that's got the chip on it to put in the computer. And as annoying as it is, I really understand the value of that sort of thing. And I don't know if you noticed, but Microsoft last Tuesday had probably, I think they said it's the largest security update on Microsoft systems in the history of Windows.
Wow.
That pushed itself out. And in fact, that kind of leads towards kind of my tip for this week. One of the tips I wanted to talk about is Adobe Acrobat. They found a very serious zero-day exploit that can seriously compromise your computer. And the good news is they found it and they fixed it right away. So for our viewers and our listeners, if you have not updated Adobe Acrobat in February of 2013, and hopefully you're going to check it anyway, you can go and you can fix it. Just go up to Help and check the updates and download and install the update. It might have already pushed through to your machines. And this is an Acrobat problem that's not only Windows, but it's also a problem in Mac, and it's a problem in Ubuntu machines. We posted it over at our Facebook page as soon as we heard about it, over at facebook.com/RTFRP, and in our Google Plus community that we have, Real Tech Community. And we actually got feedback from several people thanking us for putting it up there.
Great.
So that's a tip. I mean, go check it out. Make sure you're up to speed on Adobe Acrobat. And the worst part about that is once it infects your machine, when you send a PDF to somebody else, you're essentially sending a potential payload to them because it's building itself into your PDFs as you send them.
Because it basically taints the Acrobat engine that's creating the PDF? Is that what you mean?
It installs two DLLs, and one of them will start putting itself into whatever it is you're sending out.
Wow. Scary stuff.
Yeah. The other thing I mentioned, just mentioned briefly, we have a Real Tech for Real People Google community, and I'm beginning to really, really like these communities. I don't know if you've joined a whole lot of groups in Flickr where you share your pictures based on categories. You probably have a Camaro group that you share your Camaro pictures in.
Camaro. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Corvette, what am I thinking?
So Google Plus is essentially mirroring that, where you can join circles of people, I guess?
Yeah, so you join based on whatever community you're interested in. So Corvette. But you don't like Camaros?
I have nothing against Camaros. Okay. It's just a different car, that's all.
Yeah. And so I've joined some photography ones, some black and white photography, some nighttime photography. In fact, one of the pictures I just threw up there for fun was one I took as I was flying into Chicago. I had my camera looking out the wing with the high ISO settings for my Sony, and I got the winglet of the plane as it flies in with the big city lights beneath it, and I had a lot of comments and suggestions and Google plus ones for that particular picture. I just thought it was fun to put up there. But not only can you join a community on photography or join a real tech community, any interest you have is probably a community that's being built on it. There's a Big Bang Theory community I happen to notice tonight. So I'd say if you're in Google Plus, or if you're not in Google Plus, get over there and then start checking out the communities, as well as building your own circles. And then you can share specific things into those communities. And as I go down the road here, as I understand it, communities are going to be able to do Google Hangouts and do these live, save, and record the broadcast ones. So you may be finding that we shift away from being part of SCM Professor for where these videos are hosted, and we may actually be able to get these things hosted and stored in the Google Plus Hangout for a real tech community. We'll see.
Excellent.
So your pick. I think this is about as much of Tony's thoughts as what we just did a little while ago. What is this?
You know, this is a interesting application of modern technology, in my opinion. So the guy behind this is named Robert Lanza. To some people that might ring a bell. I think it rang a bell with you. You know, he's the person that is most known for the work he did on the human genome and stem cell research and, you know, cloning of animals. Like, he was the first to clone like cows and things like that. So he's a very, very, you know, bright guy who's at the cutting edge of modern science. He's recently extended his, you know, radar to cover the area where, like, theoretical physics, you know, the realm of Albert Einstein and company, starts to intersect with biology. And his views are just astounding. I mean, very, very thought-provoking. And he challenges a lot of the long-held beliefs on essentially what reality even is. You know, what is time? What is space? And his principles revolve around the fact that it all starts within the biological entity. So within you, within me, and all the things we perceive are really based on what starts within ourselves. For example, you've probably heard the old, you know, kind of conundrum around, hey, if there's a tree in the woods and it falls,
yeah,
and there's no one there, no animal there, no tape recorder there, no observation of any kind, does it still make a sound? I mean, there's a chapter in his book where he will convince you without a doubt that no, it does not make a sound. You say, how can that be? He said, well, what is sound? Sound is what happens when vibrations hit our eardrums. And our brain and our wiring, you know, because we are humans, is able to translate that into something we recognize as sound. But he says if we're not there, and if no observer is there, all that is a bunch of puffs of air moving around, and nope, there's no sound. You start to think, he's right. And where does this go? And then he talks about how even something as fundamental as time doesn't really exist. You know, and he talks about, and this is where he starts to link in, you know, Einstein's theories of relativity to say, look, time is all dependent on the observer as well. And, you know, he links it back to his work on human genetics and disease, and actually talks about some amazing stuff of how all the time cosmic rays are striking the Earth's atmosphere. You know, we were talking about the meteorites. Well, cosmic rays are always striking the Earth. And we used to think that when these rays strike the Earth and break up air molecules and create these morphed molecules and things that really only live for a millionth of a second, we used to say, oh, we're safe. That stuff hits, it's gone in a millionth of a second. None of that's reaching the Earth, impacting humans. But you know what his research has found?
No.
His research has found that because those rays are moving so fast, near the speed of light, that they actually do live long enough to make it from the edge of the Earth's atmosphere all the way to the surface, passing through us, because their clocks slow down. And he believes it is the cause of a lot of disease that is not yet explained, right, in modern medical science. So if you're interested in understanding, you know, this amazing guy's views on how modern technology is now merging with long-held beliefs of science, the Big Bang, Einstein's theories of relativity, and what that means for how we perceive the universe today. If you're interested in that at all, you probably won't be able to put this book down the way I can. It is amazing stuff.
It looks like it's going to be one I'm going to have to be adding to my queue here on my Kindle.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up because you just made me switch my pick of the week.
You switched.
I was going to pick Glimpse again. I've been using that. Maybe I'll move that and talk about it more next week. But I don't know if you listen to many radio podcasts outside of tech podcasts.
No.
But I try to listen to several other ones, some of our churches that we pay attention to, and Andy Stanley's church in Atlanta that Heather attends. But Radiolab, coming out of WNYC, is one of the most interesting science-oriented podcasts that's out there. It's extremely well done in terms of production quality. They really do tell a story with sounds and tying it together, and they use audio quotes in a very compelling way. But what made me shift here was I just listened to a couple podcasts talking about speed.
Oh.
So when you talk about hearing, they said, our nerve endings, nerve sensing goes about 60 miles an hour in the human body.
Is that it? Wow.
Remarkably slow when you think about it.
Yeah.
The fastest response we get from anything is from hearing. And they say that it's near instantaneous because it actually sends the signal to our spine. And so when you hear a bang, you notice how your back kind of tenses first before anything else happens?
Yeah.
The back felt it before your brain sensed it. And these are the types of things that Radiolab talks about. Or you talked about light and speed of light. They talked to this one professor.
By the way, that recalibrated your mic, and it took about 10 seconds to get here.
My apologies.
That's high-tech audio you got there, though.
So the other thing, they had a story, the same segment talking about speed and calibrating speed. They talked with a professor at Harvard who's been doing research, and one of the things that she's been doing is chilling, basically taking sodium molecules and making them so that they are so slow they almost completely stop, which is, if energy is heat and heat is energy, this motion, by making it so cold, it's no longer moving. It's the coldest thing ever generated.
Wow.
And by using magnets, she can form them into a box. And then they say, well, what happens if we shoot laser light, which is high energy, into something that is no energy? And believe it or not, they're able to get light to slow down to 15 miles an hour as it transits through this box and, wait for it, seal it in the box and release it later.
Wow.
So tie that with what you're reading in that Biocentrism book by Robert Lanza's Theory of Everything.
Yeah.
And we got some pretty impressive science stuff going on. So Radiolab's my pick. That's just one of the many, many stories that I've listened to. It's just the one I was listening to today. And
wow. I mean, that's great stuff. I think in both these examples, we're starting to get a glimpse into the next generations of science. Years and years ago, so everything that's been invented's already been invented. Well, I at least thought for a long time, well, these theories, guys like Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking, well, they've basically figured it out. And now you start to think, whoa, maybe not. There's a whole other set of discussions that are taking what they've done a few steps further, and it's getting really, really interesting. And I think here are two examples.
Well, let's just take that thought a step further. So if we're comfortable with saying, science reigns supreme, and let's just, I mentioned churches, we have this ongoing debate between science and religion, and science is finding the facts and the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of science is we've overturned science. We have these scientific revolutions, as Thomas Kuhn called it in the 60s when he wrote his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, these paradigm shifts. Do we really know anything? We know enough that the structures we have allow us to build buildings that allow us to do all these things. But the reality is that may not be the way the world really works.
Dude, we don't know what about 96% of the universe is made of. We can't figure it out. So do we know everything? No, I think we've just scratched the surface. And what I've read in this guy's book has me convinced of that more so than ever. I mean, some of the experiments that have been done, like, have you heard of the two-slit experiment?
Not offhand.
It's a pretty popular one. You may have seen it years ago, but this is where they shine light through like a paper with two slits in it, and they try to observe, well, is light behaving like a wave or a particle?
Right.
And the answer is yes, depending on how you choose to measure it. And he goes on to say that's proof that the universe is really bound by or defined by the biological entity observing it. If you choose to observe light as a particle, it behaves like a particle. If you choose to observe it like a wave, it responds like a wave. And he even said they've been able to divide the actual photons that go through each slit, and they've proven that if you observe one that went through one slit as a particle, the other one somehow knows that you're observing particles, and it behaves like a particle. Like they couldn't get them to behave differently. And he's saying the space between them at that level is like the equivalent of us being able to instantaneously communicate across the galaxy. And these particles can do that. Does that mean we're missing something in terms of being able to conquer the vast distances in the universe? And it is really thought-provoking, because the answer seems to be yes, we're missing something big time, because these particles can basically tip each other off. Hey, it's particle time, act like a particle, and boom, yeah, and they're acting like a particle instead of a wave, and they're separated by what to them are massive distances.
Well, this quantum entanglement type of theory, I think that's partially what you're talking about.
That is exactly it, yeah.
One particle is tied to another particle and separated, you on the other side of the world. What you do to one changes something else.
They know, yeah.
The number two, the second runner-up, or the second place winner at the International Science Fair this year, or this past year, when my nephew won the contest, the second runner-up, or the second place guy, who I thought he had the most amazing one personally, he looked at quantum entanglement as a way to send completely secure communications instantaneously by manipulating one, instantly manipulates the other in such a way that you can just, Morse code. Beep, 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 beep.
It's definitely secure because we don't even know how it's getting there.
You can't intercept it because we don't know what this thing is.
We don't understand. Yeah.
And just imagine if you take that and say, in Star Trek we call it Subspace Communications. We thought we knew what subspace was in Star Trek, but
right.
This is really kind of hitting a new angle there.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. In the simple way he maps it out, very simple drawings, and goes through the experiments. As you read that, I don't know, you'll probably be like me. Your mind just says, "Wow, we don't know anything. we don't know anything." So to me, you look at movies like Contact, for example, right? That kind of put science and religion on the opposite, poles of the discussion. I'm not convinced that's the way you look at it. I think science might be gradually figuring out, well, how do we get closer to that divine understanding? Because we're like infants when you look at some of this stuff, and we're just not there yet. And these two things might not be, parallel lines that never intersect. It stands to reason they probably do intersect somewhere. We just don't know how to even conceive it yet.
Well, going back to that same Radio Lab series that I was talking about, in the episodes I was listening to, one of the things they talk about is the fact that an atom, which we think of as a building block, I've got this table here, we got these computers, I smack my hands and my hand hits itself. Atoms are almost completely nothing. Space. They said if you were to take I think they said a basketball, and put it in the floor at Madison Square Garden, then the distance between that basketball and the building, that nothingness from the outside shell of that building, is the equivalent of the same nothingness between the nucleus and the outer electrons.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, why don't we pass through each other? How does this whole thing work? And they still grapple with that. And my favorite question, and they brought it up, and they didn't answer it even in this, is how does gravity attract?
No, we don't know. We just know that it does, and it does at a constant. You know, we can calculate it, but we don't know why it happens. And that's part of what brings up so many questions. You know, we talk about the Big Bang, right? But he says nobody can explain how all that matter ever could have existed in one in one singularity. Like, no one can explain it, and then no one can explain why we don't understand what 90-some% of it is that's out there. So he really shoots down a lot of our, I guess, the understandings of really a generation of science, and says, I'm not buying it. It's really interesting.
So what does that do to people like Kurzweil who say, or Kurzweil, I guess his name is, it says we're approaching the singularity where all knowledge is going to become known, and we're going to be able to move our intelligence into robots, and computers are going to be able to take over because they'll know everything. Does he grapple with that or deal with that at all?
Well, you know, he talks about everything centering around consciousness. And he does say, look, we don't know yet what sparks consciousness. And so I haven't finished his book yet, but I don't know if he hits it, but I'm sure his view would be, if we could ever create consciousness, yeah, that could happen. But I don't know his views on whether or not we even think we could ever create consciousness. We don't know how it comes to be today. We have no understanding of that. You know?
Interesting. And all these things start flying around other radio labs I listen to, where people say we don't actually start being able to really understand things until we get language and we have hearing, and that's some very bizarre thoughts that came out of another radio lab.
Yeah.
That until you're able to hear and understand language and words, your thought process is that your IQ literally jumps, and your understanding of the world literally jumps when you grasp language and words.
Yeah.
Some bizarre things.
And he talks about one of the more interesting passages. He talks about time. You know, what is time? You know, and he explains, well, where did the thing called a second come from? And it's something about, you know, it's the amount of time it took an object suspended from, you know, a 39-inch string or something, the time it took for it to, I don't know, swing some radius. That became a second. I mean, just like arbitrary stuff we made up. And you know, clocks. Well, you know, quartz vibrates at some obscene, you know, rate per second, and we just calibrate that, and there we make watches that keep up with this. He just talks about how time is just a construct that we made up, and that it's not really, quote, real, right? It's something that we use to organize ourselves, to coordinate activities, to determine when to meet to do this podcast. But he says it's really nothing but a construct that we built, and he really questions, you know, the whole space-time, you know, theory of Einstein around that, and talks about how, look what happens to time when you travel at these high speeds. It is real. I mean, I'm sure I'm not doing it justice, but if this is at all interesting to you, definitely check it out.
So the title of the book then is Robert Lanza's Theory of Everything, or is the title of the book Biocentrism?
It's like Biocentrism is the title, and then like subtitle, you know, it's Robert Lanza's Theory of Everything. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Biocentrism, Centrism.
Yeah.
The life and consciousness are the keys to understanding the true nature of the universe. And this isn't even an audiobook ad. We're just
No, it's a book. I'm not sure if it exists as an audiobook. It probably does. I mean, he's been in Fortune magazine, on NBC News, ABC News. I mean, he's been exposed. I just didn't hear about him until I was watching some documentary on the Science Channel recently, and I was so intrigued by the little bit on him that I decided to look at his book, and it's very interesting.
And I'm looking at his picture now. He looks like a cross between Dr. House and George Clooney.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great choice there. Well, Tony, I think we're going to have to wrap this one up. But you know, I was going to say that tech was real, but you know, I'm not sure we know what is real. after that. So
You won't after you read this, so be careful.
I guess that tech may have been.
May have been real.
And here we go.